Yeah, I'm in there somewhere. Hey, I'm going to tell you a story about something that was beating me up for a couple days, okay? It's a story about these two connectors. You got your male and your female. And you got, I call them the innie and the outie, whatever. These are QS8 connectors. They're gold plated brass. Let's see what the specs are, okay? Gold plated brass, 500 volts DC is the max you can put through these. Excuse me. 600 amp peak. I don't know what the time is, but 600 amp peak. 110 amps continuous, which is pretty good. It's more than what the, or less than what these ESCs put out. And they do get toasty. Are there better? I haven't had any fail yet, but I'm going to tell you the story. All right. Let's begin the story with these. Very good connectors. I buy them in bulk from Amazon. I used to get them from Offshore Electrics, but they charge too much, so I just get them from Amazon. It's the same exact stuff. Why would you need to spend more? You know, when you get 6 of them for $80 or something. I got fucking 50 of them for, I don't know, $24. Something like that. Don't mark my words, okay? So, over this last week, I'm trying to get some things done. And, my Hobbywing ESC, which is in the last video I posted, was giving me a hard time. I'm like, man, I've only had this thing since April. It shouldn't be giving me issues. Maybe 6 or 7 batteries I've had through the ESC, okay? And I couldn't understand why it would power on. I could calibrate it. It would do the little do, re, mi, and then play the number of battery beeps, you know, the cells in the battery. So do, re, mi, beep, 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 because I run 4 cells in my Arma Typhon. So I'm like, man, I'm doing something wrong. So I'm calibrating it to the radio over and over again, and it wouldn't go. I'd press the trigger, it'd spin the motor a little bit, and then it would stop. And on the Hobbywing, it would turn it off and reboot. On the XC ESC, it would just make it reboot. It wouldn't turn off, but it would go into overload mode, and then it would just reboot and do the music and whatever. So I'm thinking to myself, well, self, you're still doing something wrong. Maybe it's your radio. So I have a backup Noble NB4, and I got it out, and I bound to that receiver in the same thing, all right? I'm still using the same battery. It's still plugged in, okay, to my brand new charged battery. Still, it'll calibrate, it'll do its thing. All right, so I opened up and I did the unboxing thing for the ESC, and I put it in the car because I thought my Hobbywing had taken a crap on me. So the XC E8 it is. It's a 2 to 6S ESC or 3 to 6S or whatever the bullshit is. I put it in, it's doing the same thing. It'll calibrate, play the chimes, count the number of battery cells, and if I unplug the sensor, it would spin, and then it would die and reboot the ESC. So I plugged in the sensor, because that's a censored motor. It's a Castle 18, 19, 20, I don't know what motor it is, but it's a big one. So I put the sensor wire together, and now it only spins a little bit, so I thought it was on to something. No, I wasn't on to nothing. So I sit here in my room, and I'm just beating myself up. Like, what is going on? I even called one of my buds, and He used to work for Hobby Zone or Hobby King or something. And he's like, Eddie, if you've got everything soldered up and you got everything programmed, maybe it's your radio. I said, I've tried 2 different radios. I've tried different receivers. I've tried an enhanced receiver. I tried the older receivers, the general receivers, whatever it's called. Anyway, I have one right here. I even put one of these bad boys. Didn't do nothing. Still gave me the chirps and the battery counts. Spin the motor and reboot. And I'm like, it's just beating me up, man. What is going on? So about 3 hours pass. And in between, I'm taking a break, and I'll go over on my computer and do some editing because I enjoy it. I know there's like 5 people that watch my videos, but I enjoy the editing, and maybe somebody learns something. So I said, well, wifey went to sleep, and I'm not far from her bedroom, so I don't want to make too much noise running motors, making things beep. So I took my battery and I took my radio, and I went in the garage, and I have my Mojave all set up out there, ready to go, but it was raining today, so I didn't go out riding. And I put the battery together. All right, here's a clue. I put the battery together and turned on the transmitter, and I turned on the receiver, and I gave it a little bit of juice, and everything was fine. I'm like, wow. Gave it some reverse. Reverse was fine. I'm like, yeah. And then I gunned it, and smoke started to come out of the connector. The first time in like 8 years I've had smoke come out of these connectors. So I hurriedly shut everything down, disconnected the battery connector, and I looked at it. And right here on the inside, it started arcing, and that's where the little puff of smoke was coming from. Man, it stinks to high heaven too when it happens like that. It's stinky. So now I have to replace that connector because it probably fried the resistor. There is a 5.1 ohm resistor in there, which is what takes care of the spark or the arc, whatever you want to call it, when you're putting, high power batteries together with another battery or the ESC. So I'm like, I'm getting there. I'm going to explain. So I quietly come back in my hobby room. My wife she's long sleeping by now. It's like 1 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, the Mojave works. I switched over the model and bang, bong, Bob's your uncle. So I came over here, and instead of, I'm going to tell you what habit is that cost me all this drama. I wasn't plugging the battery in all the way, because when I'm setting things up on my desk, if something starts, freaking out, I want to be able to take the connector apart, because these connectors, when they're together, they're pretty tough to get apart. All right. So my habit has been just to have it in a little bit on the desk here, so when you take it apart, it's quick and you don't really cause any components any issues. And I said, well, that has to be the problem, because that is exactly what I did in the garage where my Mojave was. I didn't plug the battery all the way in, and that's why it arced inside and a little puff of smoke came out. So I came in here to my hobby room and very quietly took the motor and loosened it up, and I slid it away from the spur gear, because it's still mounted in there, I don't want to spin any tires, make too much noise. And I powered it up and made sure the battery was all the way connected into the connector for the receiver. Excuse me, I have hiccups. And lo and behold, everything worked. No smoke came out. Everything calibrated just like it was supposed to. So that's the moral of this story. XC60s and 90s, I've never had a problem with those either, but they're easier to get apart. And if you really wanted to, you could sand, the outside plastic to make it a little bit easier to get apart. But I wouldn't recommend that because it makes it a weaker connection. And you need the power to get from there to the ESC to drive your motor. So you're going to have to work on your muscles in your fingers. Anyway, you have to plug these QS8 connectors in all the way, or they're going to arc and they're going to smoke, and it's going to tell your ESC that you're being a moron because you're not prepared. All right, so there you go. Make sure that you plug your battery connector all the way in. Again, when it's on my desk, I don't bother with it. But I will from now on. I'm going to build myself a harness where I could have an inline switch and turn it on and off so I don't have to unconnect it every time I want to change something or protect something. What brought this up, you might say, Mr. Eddie? Well, as I was having problems with the Hobbywing ESC, I thought I had fried it. Again, it's because I didn't have the battery connector all the way in. And I looked down all the Facebook pages, and I'm going down YouTube, and there's other people, they're like, dude, I can calibrate it, and I can but it only goes 10 feet, and then it stops. In their case, I don't know what it was. A lot of people are not properly calibrating their ESC and their radio. The ESC's processor needs to know where the neutral, forward, and reverse is and their limits and stuff. So you have to calibrate your ESC. You put a new receiver in there, you got to do it. If I switch models, I just do it anyway. It's not hard. So, a lot of people were having issues with their ESCs. And I wonder if a lot of those guys out there, those other hobbyists, just had shitty connections here. All right. Now, I will consider myself a very proficient solderer. Okay. I solder these between 750 and 800 degrees. A lot of heat for a very little time, because if you don't use a lot of heat for a very little bit of time, you'll start making the plastic all mushy in there, and then these cylinders won't align for the pins on this side. When you go to put them together, they might push back out the other end. So you have to weld hot for a short period of time. Get the solder into a pool, put the wire in, let it cool down. Bob's your uncle, okay? When you get to the high power batteries, even if it's 4S or 3S, if this connector isn't soldered properly, if it's a cold solder, okay, just like it would be if it was a cold weld is going to break. It's kind of the same mentality. A cold solder joint is not going to carry the current from one component to the other. You have to get your what do you call that stuff in there? It's like rosin, whatever. You put that in there and you tin it so that there's a good connection from the solder, and then you tin your wires, and then you get this back into a pool and get it all mushed back together, and now you have a good junction for everything, and the current will go all the way through. But if it's a cold joint, it's not going to carry the current. And here's the thing, if your ESC isn't seeing the current because it's not being put through your connector, it's going to go into overload mode, or it's going to reboot because it's not seeing the power that it needs to turn the motor like you're telling it to. You need to get the power from the battery to the ESC, and then the ESC will take care of the business. I hope I help somebody. If you're working on your bench and you don't want to take this apart every time as you're setting things up on your desk, make yourself an inline switch. Make sure the switch can handle the current. You know, you need a larger switch. You can't use like a 5-volt switch from a receiver. You have to use a pretty meaty power switch. And that way you can leave this connected. And if something happens, you can just turn the switch off and drop the power. But that was my issue. And there are many other guys that were having an issue with their ESCs going into overload. And it wasn't a Hobbywing thing, like I might have said previously. And it wasn't an XC ESC problem. This particular brand is very similar or made in the same factory, just rebranded as Mad Max. That's what they say. I don't know if it's true. You can't get a straight answer because they don't even speak English. I've tried to contact them via email, and I've got a couple of things back from them, but they swear that Mad Max is its own company. But most of us know how regional sales work and imports and all that other stuff, and one can assume that Mad Max is for one region and XC is for another region. I don't know. I've used both, and they run identical. I use the same app for both ESCs, both for Mad Max and XC. It's the same thing. It logs up the same way. We've learned something today. Make sure your connectors are all the way together, or the power's not going to get from your battery to your ESC, and your motor's not going to spin. And when you do try to make it spin, it's going to turn off your ESC or make it reboot, and you're going to get frustrated. And you're going to be like, oh my God, I blew up my ESC. No, you didn't. You did something dumb. In my case, I didn't put it together all the way, and a little puff of smoke came out, and now I have to replace the connector. Is it a big problem? No, I don't mind soldering. I like soldering. I'm not intimidated by it. There's a time when I didn't know how to solder, and you should have seen the boogers I put off on my desk, man. Holy cow. But that's because I was using, this is like when I was 12 years old, and they had those crappy soldering irons at Radio Shack, and I saved up my $8.99 or whatever it cost, and I rode my bicycle up to Radio Shack, and I bought it, and I was so proud. And I get back to the house, and I'm trying to, I think it was like a Tamiya Hornet. It was a Hornet, and I had to resolder the motor wires from the speed controller, because remember, in those days back in the 80s, we didn't have ESCs. We had the thing with the wiper, a servo controlled wiper on a rheostat, and that's how we controlled our speed. So I was so proud to do it, and I got my soldering iron out, and I got my solder. Man, I didn't know that there are different temperatures for solder and different mixtures for the solder, and I didn't know any of that stuff. Could I have made it work with that low-powered soldering iron? Yeah, if I knew there was a solder that melted at a lower temperature. But I didn't know that. There was no internet in those days. There was just old dudes at the hobby shop that would sit around and tell you this or tell you that, man. That's how we learned. Anyway, thanks for stopping by. Hope I helped somebody. Don't forget to plug your things in. You know, I almost got my crayons out, but I didn't think it necessitated the crayons. But I had them. I was ready. I was freaking ready to get my crayons out. But it was my fault, man. It was totally my fault. So there is no valid reasons to get the crayons out today. Just plug in your connectors, and maybe your ESC isn't going to space out on you. All right? See ya.